California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell. Welcome to historic Monterey. Boy, do I love to come to this place. This is about the most historic town in all of California. For example, right now I'm standing in front of the historic Custom House, which was built back in 1827 and in its day was kind of the hub of activity during the Spanish and Mexican periods in California history. This Custom House is California Historic Landmark #1. Doesn't get any better than that. And as nice as this Custom House is, I gotta tell you, that's not why we're here. We've come to Monterey in search of trees, historic trees. 2 historic trees. Now, the first one is probably the best known, certainly the most photographed tree in all of California. You're going to know this one right away. The second tree is a little more obscure. It kind of plays second fiddle, but believe me, it is just as historic, maybe more so, than the first tree. So on this adventure here in Monterey, we're going to visit 2 trees that are very much a part of California's gold. Just getting to the first tree was an adventure. We were driving in the Monterey fog on the world-famous 17-mile drive, which takes you through some beautiful scenery and eventually right along the coast. A spectacular setting for California's best-known tree. Well, we have arrived at the location of our first historic tree, and Neil, I think some other people are onto this thing too. We're not going to be here by ourselves, are we?
No, it's a pretty popular spot.
You know, I said at the beginning of the program that this was probably the most popular, the best known and most photographed tree in all of California. Do you think I was correct in that?
I think that's absolutely correct, and some people would argue in the world.
All right, let's take a look, because here it is right over here. Here is the world famous Lone Cypress tree, just sitting right out there on that big old rock right here on the Pacific Ocean. Neil, you are the official historian for the Pebble Beach Company, and the history of this tree is tied up with the history of this land right around here, isn't it?
It is indeed. It became the symbol of the company when Sam Morse founded it in 1919.
He decided that this would be the trademark for the company.
That's correct. He thought this really represented what we were all about.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about this tree. I got a lot of cypress questions for you. How old is the tree?
As near as we can tell, it's about 250 years old. We have 100-year-old pictures where it was very mature, so.
So it's looked like that for a long time.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit over time, but not a whole lot.
And didn't you tell me at one time there were a lot of famous cypress trees around the Monterey area, not just the Lone Cypress?
Yeah, the cypresses here are so majestic that a lot of them became popular, and in addition to the Lone Cypress, we had the witch tree, the ostrich tree.
Wait a minute now. The witch tree?
The witch tree.
The ostrich tree.
Right, and the ghost tree.
And the ghost tree. Now, were they tourist sites as well? Had postcards and pictures made of them?
Absolutely. They were popular things to send home and show people how strange the trees in Monterey are.
But this one survived. And let's walk down here into this crowd of people, because there were times during its history where it almost didn't survive, weren't there?
There have been some scary times. The first was in the 1930s. There was a really stormy night, And Sam Morse was so concerned about the storm that he came down to check out the tree's safety. And when he got here, he found his lead engineer was already on the site, and they put the wires in shortly thereafter to give it a little extra security.
So that tree has been wired up since the 30s to withstand the wind out here, because there's a lot of wind out here.
It is indeed. It gets very windy on this point.
And what else happened out here over the years to threaten the tree?
Well, amazingly, in the 1970s, some vandals decided to set it on fire.
Oh my God.
It's just amazing. But the good news was that the neighbor, Mrs. Larkey, was on the scene. She saw it, called the fire department right away, and they got the fire out before there was any real damage.
We have a picture of her standing by the tree. She really saved that tree.
She did. Without her, we don't know if we'd still have the tree today.
Now this, you know, you can see all the pictures of it, but when you get here and see it in person, it really is a majestic, I want to say, photo opportunity right here, because that's what it is. It just kind of screams out for the photographer to take pictures of it. How many pictures do you think have been taken of this tree over the years?
It's got to be in the billions, because they've been taking pictures of it for over 100 years. And of course, in the early days, it was just the professional photographers. But in the last 50 years, everybody's got a camera, and it's been shot many, many times.
And what is it about this particular tree? Is it the tree? Is it the location? Is it the location and the tree? What is it?
Well, it's a combination of factors. Obviously, it's fame. It's kind of a self-breeding fame, because people know it. They want to come and take a picture of it, say they were there. But it's such a magnificent setting. When you've got the Pacific Ocean with Point Lobos in the background, and this wonderful tree that has survived over time, literally growing out of the rock. It is just a spectacular thing to be able to go home and show your friends, look, I was there. It really is kind of neat.
Okay, now we're coming down the steps, because there are different angles that you can photograph this tree from, aren't there?
Yeah, the tree has been photographed from many different angles, and it looks a little different. Here it almost looks like two trees from this angle here.
Now we're a lot closer to the tree down here, and you used to be able to get even closer than this.
Yeah, you used to be able to walk right out to the tree, but it was literally being killed with attention. People were going up so often that the roots were getting so compacted that it was starting to die. So we fenced it off, and you can't get out there anymore, but you can get pretty close.
Well, I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but who would ever think, I mean, just standing here looking at this and the way it so captivates your soul, who would ever think that just a lone cypress sitting out there on a rock could have such an effect on so many people for so many years?
It truly is amazing. I talk to people, and they say, you know, when somebody said, go look at the tree, it was like, you know, there's trees everywhere. But when they get here, they really see it. And it's just in a setting that is unsurpassed, and it really stands out as the grandeur of the Monterey Peninsula.
Boy, it is a special tree sitting right there on the rock, the Lone Cypress. Okay, continuing our adventure, we have left the Lone Cypress out on the coast, and a beautiful tree that is. And now we've come into the town of Monterey. That's the historic old town right over there. And technically right now we are in part of Monterey State Historic Park. We have come here in search of our second historic Monterey tree. And here to tell us about it, introduce yourself to everybody, Dave.
Hi, Huell. I'm Dave Chattel. I'm with California State Parks.
All right, now you know why we're here, and the first question is, we've already been to the Lone Cypress. Now we're here for this second, more obscure tree. Where is the tree? Is this it right here?
I wish I could say yes, but no, I can't. The tree is not here, Huell. The tree used to be here, pretty close to where this stone marker is at, this Celtic cross. The tree is not here, unfortunately, though.
All right, now, we were just playing with everybody because I knew this wasn't the tree ahead of time. But let's talk about what tree was here, because actually it had a couple of names, didn't it?
It did. This has been called one of the most historic trees in the United States. It's been called the Viscaino oak tree, the Junipero oak tree, and the Serra oak tree.
All right, let's go all the way back and start with the first name. Let's start from the beginning.
Well, in 1602, December, Sebastian Viscaino, he's with the Spanish soldier, he came here in Monterey, and a very important event discovering this area, and it's really recorded as the first Spanish European discovery at that time.
Of California, first
California.
landing on mainland California.
That's correct.
All right, now what happened with this tree when he landed here?
Well, it was very important to conduct a mass. So Father Antonio de la Ascensión and Sebastian Viscaino, they conduct a mass along with all the soldiers under this very famous oak tree, and that's why it was called the Viscaino oak tree.
And that oak tree, to the best of our knowledge, was located right here. And how do we know it was right in this area?
Well, we know it from historic accounts, and there are many historic accounts that say where it was at. It is difficult today, though, to figure out exactly because there's been so much that has happened to this area in terms of changes.
But we think it was right in here.
As close as I can
All
get.
right, now that was 1602.
Correct.
Now we flash forward to the second name this oak tree had.
And that's the Serra oak tree, or the Junipero oak tree. Same person, Father Junipero Serra, in 1770, finds where this oak tree is at. And it was difficult finding it, but he did. And once he found it, he also knew that this was an historic tree, wanted to conduct a mass, and this oak tree then became part of that history.
So Father Serra conducted his own mass here 170 years later. That oak had been here all that time.
All that time, and it was important to know the history of it and to continue the legacy. I think that was part of it.
So Father Serra actually had, Father Serra, of course, who established so many of the missions up and down California, he really had a sense of history and understood the importance of having another mass under this tree.
Very much, and I think he had all the parts of it that was described as the part of the ceremony, hanging bells from the tree. The tree itself was close enough that they said that the branches actually dipped into the Pacific Ocean, and that also is part of an historic account that we can try and figure out where it was at. A little more difficult again today.
Yeah, because the ocean has moved out about 100 yards from here now. This new road's been put in, so the terrain has changed, but the tree was right here. Was it a famous tree back then? Did people understand in the 1700s and the 1800s how significant this oak tree was? Was it a tourist attraction or something close to it?
Well, I would imagine at that time it was quite famous. It was revered so much that the acorns from the oak tree were gathered by the Native Americans and planted in various places, and some trees to this day we know are part of that oak tree.
Now, looking at the old pictures, it was not a huge tree. In some pictures it looks almost scrubby. But, I mean, it had a presence to it, though.
Well, I think some of the pictures that we have today, even though they may be back in the 1880s or 1890s, doesn't really show the full majesty of this tree, because we know in the 1840s it was struck by lightning. And so that could have caused quite a bit of damage, so the photographs would show a tree that wasn't doing quite as well as earlier years.
All right, we have a marker here. There it is, Junipero Serra, and this was put here when? In the 1900s?
Right around 1900.
What happened to the tree? Where is the tree?
Well, the story does go on, but we know what happened that affected the tree, the oak tree, was that an embankment was filled in to make room for a railroad connecting to Pacific Grove. And when that embankment was put in, a culvert was added to cause drainage out to the sea. The culvert collapsed around 1900, and because of that collapse, water filled in the embankment, and the oak tree did die in 1904.
Didn't it have an official death date
You call it a death certificate. It was July 6, 1904, and it was pronounced dead.
And what happened to it then?
Well, at that time, there were some workers, this is the description that we have, that were working in this area, widening the road, and they either cut some of the branches, they didn't know the historic significance of it, they uprooted the tree, and they tossed it into the Pacific Ocean. They thought their job was done.
The tree was gone.
Yes.
End of story.
End of story, maybe.
Okay, the Serra Oak adventure continues. This is getting a little out of control, Dave. Now you have brought us a couple of miles across town to the San Carlos Cathedral, which you told me is part of the historic old Spanish Presidio. What does this have to do with the Serra Oak? I thought it was dead.
Well, it was dead, Huell.
Officially dead in 1905.
Declared. So in 1905, Father Ramon Mestres, who did his rounds throughout historic Monterey, noticed that the tree was gone, pretty obvious. And he tracked it down and figured out that it had been tossed into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. It was 12 miles out to sea by this time, and he knew the history of it, so he asked a couple of fishermen to get in a boat to go out 12 miles, harpoon it, and bring it ashore. And then, from that point, he placed it in the back of the Royal Presidio Chapel.
So he actually plucked it, harpooned it out of the ocean and saved the dead tree.
Saved history.
Okay, as the story continues, we've come back behind the chapel, and here to officially greet us is
Father Joe Occhiuto.
Okay, Father Joe, Dave has told us the story so far about the priest who was here in 1905. His name was?
Father Ramon Mestres.
Who was obviously a student of history and who sent the guys out to harpoon that oak tree out of the ocean, bring it back on shore, and then what did he do with it?
Well, he preserved it. He did his very best to preserve it. He had it planted back here. He was a strong history buff, as it were, for that time, and Monterey meant a great deal to him, and he wanted to do the very best he could to preserve the history of the chapel and of Father Serra's present. And Father Serra said the first Mass under that tree, and so he wanted to have it here because the tree, when that first Mass was said, actually was the day that this parish was established in the 1770 by Father Serra.
So there was a lot of history here, and when you say he planted it back here, Dave, he didn't really plant it. The tree was dead.
It was dead, but he tried to preserve it, and I think by doing a combination of planting it into a cement base, applying crude oil and creosote as a preservative, and then also supporting the limbs through wires, it was preserved as best as could be at that time.
So he really just kind of pieced it together to try to have it back here in the back of the church.
I'm sure that tree was thinking, what's next in store?
Was it a big deal to have it back here? Did people know it was here? Was it did it become a historical landmark?
I don't think the historicity of the actual tree was known at that time, except maybe to the Portuguese fishermen and the Italian fishermen who actually pulled it out of the bay. The local parishioners obviously knew about it, but it really wasn't a time when people were that historically minded. But it was a place where people would come. It was considered like a relic of the time when Father Serra was here.
It was just a big old piece of dead wood out here. How long did it stand out here behind the church?
It stood there for several years and eventually just fell down.
It just collapsed.
You can only do so much, I guess.
And what happened to it then?
At that time, it was divided up, and pieces were sent to different parts of California to be preserved as historic mementos.
So part of the tree did remain after it fell back here?
Yes, it did.
Okay, this is exciting. Our first look at an actual piece of the tree. We've come to the front of the church, right inside the doors, and Father Joe, there's the tree.
There's the tree. That's what's left of it, at least in Monterey.
Now, what's the deal? It's right here for people to see as they're coming into church on Sunday morning.
Yes, it is. It's here so that people can come in and so be reminded of the historicity of the site.
Now, do people, let's be honest about this, do most people in your parish, do they know what that is, or do they just think that's a big old piece of dead wood sitting there?
I think they pretty much know what it is. Yes.
And what about tourists? Do they know?
Tourists come here specifically to see it. They will come with their guidebooks or with a recorded tour of Monterey, and they will stop in and take pictures and view it.
So this is part of an official tour? I thought it was more obscure than that.
Well, in some respects, it should be part of the tour because of the history of this area. So I'm glad to know it is.
All right, now looking at it, I got to tell you, it's exciting to see it at last. But it looks to me like it's filled with holes. Are those termite holes? What are those?
I believe they are termite holes.
Do you think that's what may have killed the tree, or did they come later?
Those came later. Those are current residents in the tree.
Oh. So it's got termites now.
It's got termites now.
Now, Dave, are you as excited as I am? Because I'm really excited to see this thing.
Oh, this is great. It's wonderful to see something like this still being preserved, and that connection with the history, I think, is really important.
Wow, that is just amazing to think that Father Sarah gave a mass under this tree.
Yes.
Are you a little overwhelmed?
Oh, yes. I remember when I was on the East Coast teaching history and teaching about Father Sarah, and I never thought I'd be a part of that. And here I am, standing right in front of the tree where he actually celebrated that first Mass in a church that he had built.
Wow. Okay, we are ending our Sarah Oak adventure just about 200 yards from where we started it this morning. That's where the tree originally stood, just right down there. We're ending up here in another historic place. This building housed California's first theater, and that's a whole story in itself. But it's what's inside here, Dave, that we are coming in to see, because right here over in the corner is the grand prize right here.
Here it is.
Tell us what we're looking at right here.
Well, we're looking at a very old chair. In fact, it would date back to 1602 and even before then, because we started the story with Sebastian Viscaino and the oak tree that he had the mass under.
In 1602.
In 1602. And this is the wood, the oak wood from that tree. And I consider this a pretty historic chair to sit in.
Now, I'm not going to sit in this chair because with my luck it would break, and this is a real gem right here. This wood actually came from the old tree that was rescued out of the ocean and was back in the back of the chapel for a while. So this is part of that original tree. How did it come to be a chair?
Well, there was someone who lived in this area, a local artisan, that realized the history, the importance of this tree. And when that tree came down in the back of the Royal Presidio Chapel, he wanted to fashion it into a chair and realized that it was also that tie-in with the importance of the history. So we're thankful that he did.
Boy, this really gives you a sense of what the tree looked like. This is 100% historic tree right here.
All of it.
And it's still, well, I don't know, it's pretty shaky. I really wouldn't want to sit in this thing. But isn't this amazing right here? When people come in the first theater, do they know what this is? It's kind of sitting under this, the depiction of Father Sarah giving Mass under the tree, but there's no real tie-in here.
Well, there's a little plaque that talks about the Viscaino Sarah oak. There is some information about it, but you're right, they probably don't know the history of this and the importance of it. So that's why when they come in, we have people to tell them about where they're at.
Well, it was a historic tree, and now it's a historic chair.
Absolutely.
And this is, you know, both of the trees that we have visited today, the Lone Cypress, which is a beautiful tree. But I got to tell you, this is the one I really like right here, because it's a little more obscure. It's a little more historic, and it's kind of tucked away in the corners of history. This wonderful tree that is so much a part of California's history.
It's a great story.
Both the stories are good stories. Both the trees are good trees, and both of these trees are fine examples of California's gold. Let's end by taking one more look at this great old chair, the most historic chair in California, made from what has to be the most historic tree in our state as well, the old Sarah Oak. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727 and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.